Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and the Impure issue #1 from Scout Comics. Can you actually see that? Like, I could barely see it. A lot of powerful lights, and this comic book is just very glossy. Look, there's almost a virgin cover on the back with just pencils. Kind of cool. Anyway, this is at non-stop. I guess this is a new feature of a new brand for Scout Comics. Anyway, um, I didn't dislike this. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I'm going to explain all that stuff and where this actually belongs in a hot minute. First, we got to give credit where credit's due. So, The Impure, writer Ralph Singe. Singh? Sorry, okay, I know better. Ralph Singh. There's obviously a Sikh man. Watch me be wrong on that. The artist is Haynes Radke. I know I goofed on that one. Ralph Singh does the colors. Hey, pretty cool, man. Also does some of the letters along with Mark Schmitz. That's German. Aha! And yeah, there's some editors on here. Dude, there's a lot of people doing double duty. What's up with that? Anyway, so this book is. Listen, this book jumps between 15 years ago and present. I don't know what that means. Like nowadays, last week, I don't, 5,000 years in the future. Maybe 15 years ago is today. Wouldn't that actually be a really cool, because you're taking place from, you're telling the story from 15 years in the future. So, but this doesn't have anything to do with Earth that we can tell on here or anything like that. Interesting back and forth between several of the characters in here. Listen, I really didn't like the whole bouncing back and forth in time, however. I'm going to tell you right now, that was the biggest drag for me, is trying to read this and, 15 years ago. Get a couple things in the present. Okay, get a couple things back to 15 years ago. Listen, man, can you just cut the book in half? Jesus. Like, it really got to that point. Now, I'm not mad at it for that. I understand, because this story probably shouldn't have been told in comic book form. Or maybe there's something else to it. One of the things that I notice with the Scout Comics line is that they seem to really rush stories. Like there's too much information put out in a first issue. You know what I'm saying? Often. Sometimes just there's nothing to put out and they're just putting stuff out in the first place. That happened like once though. For the most part, it feels like they're trying to jam pack too much, almost like the Scott Snyder rule or the Jason Aaron rule with comics, Just jam pack as much as you can to the first issue. Here's a better idea. Why don't you find a good pacing for your story? Separate your story into different chapters the way that Zack Snyder did for the Snyder Cut, and just take it into small digestible bites. You could binge watch Daredevil or whatever television show you want on Netflix or some other streaming service, but you can also take a break. And the end of those episodes, each one of those ends signifies a moment where you could say, I'll come back to this tomorrow. I'm saying, or binge it. It's your choice. But give the option. In this particular case, there's just too much thrown at you. Now, does that mean that it's a bad story? No, absolutely not. Even though some of the things kind of fall back on stories that we've seen before. Case in point, these guys come in, these I don't know, military police type people. They come walking into this place of business where these kids are playing and a mom and the granddad, it looks like, are just hanging out. And they're like, hey, has anybody seen any riffraff in here? You seen anything bad? And the girl's like, yeah, no, nothing bad to report. No criminals, nothing, no suspicious, shady characters or anything like that. Everything's good. And he comes up and he kind of gives a little thing on her chin. It's like, hey, baby. This is that attitude, come to the back room with me or something like that, Yeah, because that's real respectful, and you're sure to find someone like that anyway. It's horrible. As he's walking out, he's like, hey, you make sure to report any bad characteristical behavior. Sure, so you're saying that I can make a complaint about you? Because you're kind of scum, buddy. I think you're scum, buddy. And it's funny because I actually didn't mean to say that on purpose, but I'm glad that I did. That's actually, I had to think, where's that from? That's from RoboCop. Listen, a lot of stuff that happens in here, you kind of got like a RoboCop kind of character in here, and we don't really have the full origin of this character yet, but they seem to imply where this is going. The one kid that's there, by the way, the criminal activity that's actually happening in that store is that there was a book there. You know, like the Book of Eli and the Book Thief. Just many other kinds of stories that are already out. Like books are illegal because ooh, they're all contraband because you get knowledge. I mean, like, there's this thing called the internet right now where you get all sorts of information. You know what I'm saying? So you're saying that me giving this information on video form is okay, but in a book form, it would be bad in this future? Whatever. I expect that this will be addressed at some point, and they'll show that this was 15 years ago, before there was transfer of digital data to, go off into the Ethernet, the information superhighway. Um, this story works, but not in comic book form. I feel like the story would work better in an actual television show. It's a reason why I brought up the idea of a television show in the first place. I believe that you could find a way to put all of these issues into screenplay form, and in this first issue, make it a double length episode, the pilot, make it that 45 minutes long, that with commercials it'll come to an hour. Actually, I think it would have to come to 43 minutes long, depending on your sponsors. But anyway, just something along those lines. And then bang, suddenly the transitions between 15 years ago and modern day, they're a lot more seamless. You can make them interesting how they transfer. Like, to me, the best time frame changes were always in the original Terminator movie. T2 also, but they didn't do it as much. The original Terminator movie, there were just amazing moments where you just look and it's like, like the scene where he's in the car and he's just chilling, and like he sees the construction vehicle working, it's going over this mounds of dirt, and then he's suddenly going over mounds of skulls, and it's like, what's going on there? And then it turns into the futuristic chase, and it's like, this is amazing. I mean, those time changes were amazing. And if you did something like that with this in a television show, it would work. Listen, I'm always not as hard on the people, especially since, there are like no known people. Don't ruin my book, damn it. Gravity. There are no known people. I don't know who any of these people are in this book, who made this book. I have no idea who any of these people are. I've never heard of them before. You know what I'm saying? Maybe there's a possibility I have, but for the most part, I haven't. So every single one of them deserves a serious, clear-cut break. The funny thing is, I'm not actually giving any of them a break in here because it's not necessary. This was a good story. At first, the artwork it's going to throw you off. I don't know if I'm going to have pages for this to show you or not, so I should just show you some of the things now. You look at some of this artwork, and it's like, this is very pedantic. It's like there's a kid drawing for the most part. And it's not, but, kind of is. But at the same time, then I I think I got like maybe 4 pages in before, because I'm just like, just take it easy. Maybe the art is going to reflect the story. I have to actually understand the story first, And sure enough, just a few pages in, I get to the point where I'm like, no, this makes sense, this art. Because manga is truly childish, and yet look at the stories that they're telling you with manga. All of the stories that are told with manga, those stories are drawn exactly the way that they need to be done. And that's just fantastic. I love the idea of that. Absolutely and totally from beginning to end. So likewise, I have to transfer this over to this particular comic book. The art in here is fantastic. In fact, I would even be okay if this became an animated series on, a Netflix or some streaming service. And the exact same artist, if he's able to do this on, film or whatever, I would love to see this version of the art in this story, because I think it would really add to the character of the story. When we get to the old-timey stuff, it works. They look like tall hobbits talk with each other. So they look like they're pure people talking with each other, And then when we get to the futuristic stuff with the cyborg people and things like that, it looks so overblown, so over the top, which is what it's meant to be. So I'm impressed with how, quote unquote, bad the art is, because it's not bad. This guy could wind up being, F. Picasso. This guy could wind up being Van Gogh, where he just draws some things that are just amazing and they blow your mind. But for the purpose of this story, he's drawing specifically like this. I don't know. Maybe this is the only style that the individual draws. Like I said, these are all, for the most part, unknowns to me, But I'll tell you right now, Scout did a good job in picking the people for this comic book because I really did enjoy this. Um, One thing I do wonder about Scout comics, though, since so many of these comics do have a very like jam-packed first issue, I wonder if it's on the editor's part that is saying, put in more, put in more, put in more. Can we therefore say to the bosses, can the editors turn around to the boss and say, hey, rather than stuffing this thing, can you give them an extra 4 pages? Maybe 2 pages would be enough, right? Front and back, two of those, 2 sheets, right? Maybe that would be enough to actually tell the story sometimes. Maybe you need a slightly bigger page count to tell your stories. Marvel's willing to do it. DC's willing to do it. DC not very often, but they do it sometimes. They've been doing a lot this week, that's for sure. The thing is, I understand this is going to be more expensive, so maybe they just can't. I don't, honestly, I don't know. I don't know the inner workings and the goings on behind the scenes with Scout Comics, but a lot of these little, and they are minuscule problems, but a lot of these problems are things that I feel like they could be corrected with, from my angle at least, fairly simple fixes, right? Don't rush the comic book. Don't force so much into the comic book. Give it a couple extra pages if you need to, but let the damn stories breathe, right? Some of these stories, maybe they don't need to be pushed out. You know what I'm saying? Some of the stories just aren't great. And I'm just talking about in Scout in general, right? Just there's a lot that could go into this. There's so much that can go into this. But again, I can't help but saying that Scout is honestly one of my favorite of the independent comic book publishers, because look at all the people who have the opportunity to put something out, right? If you want to get a comic book out, there are very few gatekeepers to get through as far as excuse me, as far as Scout Comics is concerned. I mean, most of us know how hard it is to get into an Image Comics comic book, right? Not the easiest thing in the world. Scout, probably a little bit easier. You can cut your teeth there, especially if you can take a little bit of criticism, right? But like I pointed out, not a whole lot of criticism to give in regards to this comic book. This is a really fun one that I think would just simply do a little bit better in an animated form on a streaming service. Maybe on Funimation or one of those, stations. Anyway, I like this. And if you like that kind of RoboCop, Ghost in the Shell kind of story, I think that you'll dig on this too. Anyway, guys, I'm out. I'll talk to you later. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.